So let's just, without further ado, jump into the content, and more importantly, the insights into what we're anticipating. So we know, have to start from the top, because right now for healthcare companies, really all companies, it's about global disruptions, inflation, how that impacts pricing, purchasing power of different actors. So I want to start discussing this global situation a little bit, specifically the disruption. Starting out with Cecilia, can you talk us through how what's been happening on a global level from China to US Fed rate hikes is impacting the macro view in Brazil, specifically your headline numbers around GDP, inflation, et cetera?
Yeah, of course. As you said, there's been a lot of global disruptions at the moment, but before we start talking a little bit about that, I think it's important to just very briefly talk about the panorama of how we see Brazil's growth evolving over the next couple of quarters. So as you can see here, this is how our forecasts have behaved and have progressed over the past few months. Ultimately, at the moment, we do expect Brazil will grow at a very moderate level at about 0.8% for 2023. I would say that our bias still continues to be to the downside, so it's not unlikely that we'll be revising these numbers negatively as we move into 2023. And I would say primarily where the weakness of Brazil's economy is going to be concentrated, it's still very much around that consumer spending story. So month after month of consecutively high inflation is definitely going to eat into the overall disposable income of Brazilian consumers. So very much weighing on the ability of Brazil to grow as an economy as a whole, and also a bit of fragility as well on the investment side of things. So we're definitely going to have a continuation of the political uncertainty that we're going to start seeing heightening over this next coming semester, but also some lingering concerns on the fiscal landscape, which is also pretty important for Brazil as well. But as you mentioned, Alec, there's definitely been quite a few elements on the global landscape that's also going to impact not only Brazil, but I would also say Latin America's ability as a whole to grow. So first, I would say one of the main things that we've been tracking that's going to have implication for Brazil's growth dynamics is China's COVID-19 strategy. So we don't expect a change of the zero COVID-19 situation in China. So at the moment, even though we are projecting and expecting that China will be able to develop its own mRNA vaccine, that will really only happen towards the tail end of 2023. So we're still going to be dealing with ad hoc lockdowns on an ongoing basis until at least the second end of next year. And that's definitely going to continue creating pressures, not only on the inflation side of things, but also on the supply chain management issue as well. So that's definitely going to be a concern that we see going into 2023 as well. I would say the next global factor is definitely the ongoing situation we have between Russia and Ukraine, but also how that implicates the European continent from an energy standpoint. You can see here that from our scenarios and from our likelihoods at the moment, we still don't expect an outright ban to gas exports to the European continent. Expect some level of continued decrease of gas supplies to the European continent, to the point that we are expecting some level of gas rationing later this year for pretty important European markets. And to an extent, that's also going to implicate and going to create a recessionary scenario for quite a few of these key markets as well. And then finally, I would say from the global standpoint, is this Fed policy that has the most direct relationship, I would say, to Brazil's ability to grow and some of these credit and monetary policy dynamics. We currently are very much squarely in our downside scenario. So with the latest announcements of the 75 basis points hike twice now, we very much expect the US is going to continue its process of monetary tightening over the course of the next few months, and finish with a benchmark interest rate a little south of 4%, which for the US economy is pretty significant. All of that, I would say, will continue to have implications for our cost outlook. So here is essentially how we see that developing over the course of the next few quarters. The main
Hmm.
takeaway here is that we expect very little easing from a cost standpoint. So when we're talking about shipping and for a lot of the key commodities for that most of our clients care about, we're still not going to be dealing with a pricing environment that's paralleled or similar to 2019. So that's still very much going to continue impacting those margins and that level of profitability. And in an extent, also going to continue fueling that inflation that we still see coming out of Brazil's economy as well.
Right.
Um, so,
So, if I can contextualize it,
mhm.
no matter who wins the election, it's not like 2023 is not going to be rosy from an external perspective, at least off the bat. Um, so, and from a business management perspective, we can't count on some of those uncontrollable cost inputs to get better. So there'll be pressures from a cost perspective still in place, at least for the foreseeable future, and still lack of predictability. And Cecilia, I'm probably in trouble at this point because I forgot to mention how we can submit questions. So if you want to submit questions during this session, you can submit them to FrontierView webinars, one of the attendees that you will find within the application. And we will answer those. We'll take a Q&A section at the end here. Cecilia, before I want to move on to Gabby here in a second, and talk about how that's impacted some of the dynamics in the healthcare system in Brazil. Is there anything else you'd like to add there?
Yeah, no, very briefly. So just looking at the overall evolution of inflation, which is definitely something that's very top of mind for our clients. What we continue to see is that even though this past month we did see deflation in Brazil's economy, I would say that's still very primarily focused within the changes that we've seen around fuel taxes. So when you consider the broader evolution of prices in Brazil's economy, there's still very little easing.
Hmm.
So that's still very much a source of concern moving forward. And we only really expect that convergence back to central bank target rates in the beginning stages of 2024. But yes, as we can all expect, all of this costing environment and these global disruptions have also had very real implications for the health sector as well.
Yeah, yeah, very, very interesting. So great. I actually do then want to transition. Gabby, how have you seen the global disruptions playing out within, has there been supply chain issues in Brazil, other disruptions that have been sort of headline events?
Yeah, Alex. So I would say that for the healthcare sector specifically, these supply chain challenges, particularly from China and India, have been probably the most disruptive factors. So you've had both public and private hospital networks reporting shortages of essential medicines and supplies, ranging anywhere from antibiotics to injectable pain relievers that are essential for surgeries and for other hospital care, as well as contrast agents for diagnostic exams, etc. And so this issue has been pretty widespread, and to kind of mitigate the situation, the Ministry of Health has identified 86 medicines that are at risk for shortages, and it has started to suspend the CEMED price cap for a number of these medicines. And so that's hopefully going to offer a little bit of relief in those shortages. But there's also other proposals being floated, like for
Hmm.
example, tax exemptions for certain medicines. That has been kind of a proposal of the Ministry of Health. And then on the other side, kind of from the local industry, there's been a new push for pharmaceutical localization strategies in order to improve Brazil's production capacity, or even just bringing supply closer to Brazil. So essentially thinking about partnerships with Argentina or other LATAM markets for
Hmm.
production of essential
Yeah,
medicine.
interesting. That starts opening interesting questions about especially public procurement in 2023 and how they'll look at let's say the diversity of suppliers and production capacity.
Hi, my name is Krista Regani, and I'm Marketing Director here at FrontierView. I'd like to thank you for watching a segment of this webinar. If you'd like access to the full video and our latest insights, data, and research, sign up for a free trial with us today. Simply scan the QR code on the screen.